He never planned to change anyone's future that afternoon. Mark Lewis was just a tired single dad with coffee-stained fingers, a restless 7-year-old daughter at home, and a mind that refused to stop solving problems even when life felt like it was barely holding together. The napkin he grabbed wasn't symbolic or dramatic, it was simply the nearest thing he could write on while standing in line at a crowded cafe near the downtown transit station. He had 15 minutes before picking up Lily from her after-school program and exactly $12 left in his checking account until Friday. That was the rhythm of his life now, tight margins, constant calculations, and the quiet determination to never let his daughter feel how close things sometimes came to falling apart. Mark used to be a systems engineer at a mid-sized logistics firm, the kind of job where problems were invisible until they exploded into disasters. He was good at it, exceptionally good, but when his wife passed away 3 years earlier, the careful balance between career and parenthood collapsed. Meetings didn't care about daycare schedules, and deadlines didn't pause for grief. Eventually, after too many missed pickups and one terrifying moment when Lily waited alone outside school for nearly an hour, Mark resigned. He told himself he'd find something flexible. Instead, he found contract work, late nights, and an endless mental checklist of bills, lunches, school forms, and bedtime stories. That day in the cafe, Mark was half listening to a conversation behind him. Two women in tailored coats were speaking in urgent, clipped tones about supply chain delays, cost overruns, and a looming quarterly review. One of them, her voice calm but strained, mentioned a projected loss figure so large Mark almost laughed. $40 million. The number hung in the air like a challenge. His engineer's brain latched onto it instantly, not out of ambition, but reflex. He turned slightly, not to eavesdrop intentionally, but because the problem was already forming itself in his mind. They were talking about a distribution bottleneck caused by a recent software update that failed to account for regional demand spikes. Mark knew the pattern well. He'd seen it before, models that assumed stability in a world defined by volatility. The fix wasn't expensive hardware or mass layoffs, it was a feedback loop adjustment, a smarter way to weight real-time data against predictive forecasts. He imagined the solution so clearly that his hand moved before his thoughts caught up. He pulled a napkin from the dispenser, smoothed it on the counter, and began scribbling boxes, arrows, and a few equations. It wasn't pretty, but it was precise. The woman with the strained voice noticed. At first, she frowned, clearly annoyed by the intrusion. Mark realized too late how it must look, an unshaven man in a faded jacket, scribbling while listening to a private conversation. He was about to apologize when she spoke. "Do you mind explaining what that is?" she asked, not unkindly, but with a sharp curiosity that cut through his embarrassment. Mark hesitated. He wasn't pitching. He wasn't selling. He was just solving. "I think your system's overcorrecting," he said carefully. "You're smoothing out anomalies that shouldn't be smoothed. That's creating blind spots." He slid the napkin toward her, already preparing for dismissal. Instead, she studied it. Really studied it. Her eyes moved quickly, tracing the logic. The other woman leaned in. The cafe noise faded into the background as something shifted. "This would require reweighting the real-time data stream," the woman said slowly. "We tried that last year, but it destabilized the forecasts." "Because you adjusted the wrong variable," Mark replied before he could stop himself. "You changed the output sensitivity. You need to change the input confidence interval." He pointed to the napkin. "Here. This node." There was a pause. A long one. The woman exhaled and gave a short, incredulous laugh. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mark," he said. "I should go." "My daughter." "I'm Elena Carter," she interrupted. "COO of Helix Global." She flipped the napkin over and wrote her number on it. "Can you come by our office tomorrow?" Mark almost said no. Not because he didn't want to, but because he'd learned to distrust sudden opportunities. They often came with hidden costs, and he couldn't afford disruption. But Lily's face flashed in his mind, her quiet pride when he made it on time, her trust that he always would. $40 million was an abstract number, but stability wasn't. He nodded. "I can be there at 10. That night, Mark tucked Lily into bed, read her favorite story twice, and sat at the kitchen table long after she fell asleep, recreating the napkin model on his old laptop. He refined it, stress-tested it, and ran hypothetical data through it until dawn crept in through the blinds. By morning, he was exhausted but certain. The idea worked. Helix Global's office was all glass and steel, the kind of place Mark used to walk into without thinking. Now, every step felt heavier. Elena met him in a conference room overlooking the city. She'd already had her team mock up his idea overnight. The preliminary results were startling. Loss projections dropped sharply. Bottlenecks smoothed out without suppressing critical signals. What Mark had scribbled in 5 minutes solved a problem they'd been bleeding over for months. By the end of the week, the projected $40 million loss was gone. Not reduced. Gone. Replaced by a modest gain and a roadmap for long-term resilience. The board was stunned. Consultants were confused. Elena was quietly furious at herself for nearly missing it. She offered Mark a job. Senior systems architect. Full benefits. Flexible hours. Remote options. A salary that made his hands shake when he read the number. Mark asked for a day to think. Not because he was unsure, but because he needed to tell Lily properly. When he explained it to her, carefully, simply, she smiled and hugged him. "So you don't have to be tired all the time?" she asked. "I'll still be tired," he said softly. But less worried. Weeks later, the napkin was framed in Elena's office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The reminder that brilliance doesn't always arrive in tailored suits or polished decks. Sometimes it stands in line for coffee, worrying about pickup times and grocery budgets, solving problems not for applause, but because that's what it knows how to do. Mark never told the story the way others did. He didn't talk about saving $40 million or impressing executives. When people asked him how he got the job, he shrugged and said, "I wrote something down when it wouldn't leave me alone." And every morning, when he walked Lily into school without rushing, he knew that the real value of that napkin had nothing to do with money at all. Single dad found a dying female cop. What happened next shocked the entire police force. The rain had been falling steadily since early evening, soaking the empty streets and turning the city into a blur of streetlights and reflections. Daniel Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he drove his old pickup truck through the industrial district, exhausted after another long shift at the warehouse. His back ached, his hands were rough from lifting crates all day, and his mind was heavy with worry about getting home on time to help his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, with her homework. Since his wife had died 3 years earlier, Daniel's life had become a careful balance of work, parenting, and survival. There was no room for mistakes, no safety net, and no one to rely on but himself. Daniel smiled softly. Daniel wasn't supposed to be on this road. His leg. He usually avoided the industrial zone at night. Emily shook her head. A traffic accident had blocked the main street, you did what forcing him to take a detour. Afraid to do. The story of the single dad who found a dying female cop spread across the country, shadows, becoming a symbol of courage, integrity, and the power of ordinary people to change a broken system. His headlights caught something unusual near the roadside. Life finally became something more than survival. He thought it was a pile of trash or a fallen sign. Then he saw movement. His heart skipped. Daniel pulled over, ignoring the voice in his head telling him to keep driving. He stepped out into the rain, his boots splashing in shallow puddles, and cautiously approached the figure lying near a concrete barrier. As he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a woman in a police uniform, soaked in blood, her body twisted unnaturally, her breathing shallow and uneven. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. The female officer's face was pale, her lips blue, and there was a dark stain spreading across her abdomen. Her gun was missing, her radio smashed beside her, and there were signs of a struggle all around: broken glass, tire marks, and blood leading toward the shadows between the warehouses. Hey, stay with me," Daniel said, panic rising in his chest. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto his face. Her hand weakly grabbed his jacket. They're still out there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Please, don't let them take my badge." Daniel swallowed hard. He didn't know anything about police work, criminals, or investigations. He was just a warehouse worker and a father. But in that moment, none of that mattered. "I'm calling for help," he said, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. "No," she gasped, squeezing his arm with surprising strength. "They jammed my radio. If you call now, they'll hear. Please, listen to me." Daniel froze. Fear crawled up his spine. "My name is Officer Emily Reyes," she continued, coughing violently. "Internal Affairs, undercover." The cops who did this, they're dirty. They'll kill me if they find me. Daniel's mind reeled. Corrupt cops. Undercover. This was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He wanted to run. He wanted to pretend he never saw her. But then he thought of Lily, her small hands holding his, her trust in him to always do the right thing. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she slipped something into his hand, a small flash drive stained with blood. This is everything," she said. "Names, evidence, video. If I die, you have to give it to Captain Harris. He's clean. Promise me." Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I promise." Her grip loosened, her eyes closing again. Daniel didn't hesitate anymore. He lifted her carefully, ignoring the pain in his arms and back, and carried her to his truck. He laid her across the back seat, pressed his jacket against her wound too. Slow the bleeding, and drove like his life depended on it, because now, it did. He didn't go to the nearest hospital. Instead, following Emily's weak directions, he drove across town to a small, privately run medical clinic that operated late hours and didn't ask many questions. By the time he arrived, Emily had lost consciousness, and Daniel was covered in her blood. Doctors rushed her into surgery, and Daniel collapsed into a chair in the waiting room, shaking. He stared at the flash drive in his hand, realizing the weight of what he now carried. This wasn't just evidence. It was a death sentence if it fell into the wrong hands. Hours passed. When the doctor finally came out, his expression was grim. "She's alive," the doctor said. "Barely. The bullet missed her heart by centimeters. But she lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours are critical." Relief flooded Daniel, but it was short-lived. As he stepped outside to get some air, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street with its engine running. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. Something about it made his stomach twist. He drove home carefully, checking his mirrors the entire way. That night, as Lily slept peacefully, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flash drive. He plugged it into his old laptop, hands shaking. What he saw made his blood run cold. Video footage of police officers taking bribes. Audio recordings of illegal raids. Surveillance photos of officers meeting with known criminals. Names, dates, times. It was enough to bring down an entire precinct, and get anyone involved killed. The next morning, Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Carter," a calm voice said. "This is Detective Mark Sullivan. We believe you may have information regarding an injured officer. We'd like to speak with you." Daniel's heart pounded. "How did you get my number?" "There's no need to worry," Sullivan replied smoothly. "We just want to help." Daniel hung up. Within hours, strange things started happening. His truck was followed. His landlord mentioned men asking questions about him. Lily's school called to report someone had tried to pick her up, claiming to be a relative. That was when Daniel realized the truth. The police force wasn't just dirty. It was rotten to the core. With no one else to trust, Daniel reached out to Captain Harris, just as Emily had asked. They met secretly in a church basement late at night. Harris listened in silence as Daniel explained everything and handed over the flash drive. "This changes everything," Harris said, his face pale. "But it also puts a target on your back." "I just want my daughter safe," Daniel replied. "I never asked for this." "You did the right thing," Harris said quietly. What happened next shocked the entire police force. Within days, federal agents raided the precinct. High-ranking officers were arrested. Evidence seized. Media swarmed the city. Officer Emily Reyes, against all odds, woke up and testified from her hospital bed, confirming everything Daniel had provided. But the biggest shock wasn't the arrests. It was Daniel, the quiet single dad, warehouse worker, nobody special, who stood in front of cameras, refused witness protection, and testified openly, risking his life so the truth would come out. His courage inspired other officers to come forward, breaking a wall of silence that had stood for decades. The police force was dismantled and rebuilt. New leadership took over. Training programs were rewritten. Oversight became stricter than ever before. Emily survived. Months later, she stood outside Daniel's small house, no longer in uniform, holding a badge in her hand. "You saved my life," she said. "And a lot of others." Daniel smiled softly, Lily peeking out from behind his leg. "I just did what anyone should do." Emily shook her head. "No. You did what most people are too afraid to do. The story of the single dad who found a dying female cop spread across the country, becoming a symbol of courage, integrity, and the power of ordinary people to change a broken system. And for Daniel Carter, life finally became something more than survival. It became hope.